Hi, this is Dr. Patrick Cohn with Peak Performance Sports, and today I have a very special guest, someone that got me very excited about this field and really started it all for me more than 20 years ago, and his name is Ken Ravizza. He's a part-time professor now at Cal State Fullerton. He's no longer a full-time professor, and Ken is also the co-author of Heads Up Baseball that he wrote with Tom Hansen. And he's worked with the Tampa Bay Rays for the last couple of years, but now going back and staying in his hometown, working with the Anaheim Angels again soon. And Ken's worked with athletes at all levels, from junior, collegiate, Olympic, professional. He's done it all. He's been around there. And so the listeners know I studied with Ken in the mid-'80s at Cal State Fullerton, where Ken and I collaborated, and we worked with the hockey team there. He unleashed me on the hockey team, and he helped me out with the softball team. And so that's where I really got excited about this field of sports psychology. And today we have Ken's going to spill the beans for us and is going to give us some solid information on how to improve your performance. Ken, thanks for joining me today.
Great to be here, Patrick. Hey, man, I can't believe it was that long. You sat in my office and told me what you wanted to do with your master's, and you told me, Ken, I got to get it done in a year and a half, and you did it. You went right after it. And, I forgot about that ice hockey team you worked with, Patrick. You were really into that. Guy coming from upstate New York could understand that.
Oh, that was a lot of fun. I tell you, those were the days. Oh, man, if I could go back and relive those times, it was a lot of fun there. I felt like I learned a lot, and I was on vacation the whole time.
Oh, great. All right. You got to have fun when you're doing it, man. No question about that.
So who influenced you the most? I know there really wasn't a lot of people around when you were coming up, and you studied with Maslow, or you studied Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but in terms of the psychologists or mental coaches, who had the biggest influence on your thinking when you were coming up?
Well, I never met Maslow. I never studied with him, but I read all his material when I was a graduate student, and after that, I'd say the first person that really influenced me in this whole field were my high school football coach and my elementary physical education teacher. They were the first ones that really turned me on to that there's a lot going on in human movement, in participation in sport. From there, Eleanor Matheny, my professor at the University of Southern California, really showed me what the significance of sport participation was, and showed me how to refine those skills of reflection and introspection to really look at what can be learned in sport participation. In terms of sports psychology per se, the first big person for me was Bruce Ogilvie. I still remember when I was starting with the Angels, I went up to see Bruce, and because he had been in professional sport for years. And the first thing he said to me is, Ken, you're going to get fired. And I still remember, wow. Now, I was lucky. It took me about 15 years to get fired, but that's important. You're only going to be there for so long. But Bruce was a major impact. And after Bruce, I would say it was more by committee. Whole different bunch of peers where we were coming up together, like Bob Rotella, Keith Henson, Gloria Bellegay, just a whole group of people. David Eukelson, faces are flashing by my head, Wes Syme, just so many people where we shared ideas, where you were comfortable sharing, where you got feedback. You were open to get feedback from other people because the field was relatively new, expanding, and that's a long-winded answer to your question, Patrick.
Oh, that's the information I'm looking for, because it's important to understand where you're coming from as a mental coach in your background. And I know you were heavily influenced by Maslow and his hierarchy of needs and studying peak experience in sports. And that got me onto, looking at peak performance in sports as well.
But I think the other thing is I was really influenced by that high school football coach and coaches. I spent the vast majority of my time in gyms, on practice fields, watching practices, talking with coaches. That's where I learned a lot from doing that. And I think a lot of young people in the field don't spend enough time just observing and taking information in and understanding the subcultures that are involved in sport and understanding all the dynamics going on. Sometimes they get too anxious to go in and want to do sports psychology, where you have to spend some time just observing and watching.
So how have athletes changed, from a mental game perspective and working with athletes, how has athletes changed from the late 70s, early 80s till today? Is there differences in terms of how you would go about handling them as a mental coach, or how athletes behave today?
I think athletes, not only athletes, young people. I mean, I'm a university professor and have students change. In some ways they haven't. In other ways, they have dramatically. And some of the changes that I really see to address those, one is the Sesame Street attention span of about 2 minutes, that they really remain engaged. That would be one. Number two, that they have to know you care before they care what you know, which for me has always been important, but I think with athletes today, it's really critical, the whole relationship building component of it, that's critical. Next is they want instant gratification. This is tough because they want it quick, because our society is much quicker, it's much faster. So the idea of working slowly, taking the 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, 1 forward, 1 back, that whole progression that really goes with excellence is difficult at times. I think another thing is it's the helicopter parents effect, where the parents are so involved in checking out everything. And sometimes the parents, and myself being a parent, guilty of this, you want your children to feel comfortable. And you don't want them to have to go through the rough times, but they need to go through the rough times. I think we protect them too much at times. And with the young people, you really see that played out. They have a hard time being uncomfortable. And I think we'll talk about this later, but my biggest thing is helping them learn and teaching them skills to be more comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's really what high-level performance is.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into that. I'm seeing more perfectionism today. I haven't been at it as long as you can, but it seems like maybe that's just the type of student that will seek me out, is the student with the perfectionism that is great in practice, loves to practice, but it just doesn't get the job done in competition. And that may relate to, as you say, they have trouble with mistakes and feeling uncomfortable. Would you say that there's some relationship there?
I think there's some there, because they want it just right, and when it isn't just right, they start freaking out. They start losing it, because it's got to be, exactly the way it should be. And my perspective is, I tell the athlete, are you that terrible an athlete that you have to feel great to perform well? Are you that bad that you need every call by the officials, that you need every play made by your teammates? Are you that bad? And they go, no. And I go, so then why do you get so upset by that stuff? But the perfectionist, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, the perfectionism drives you when you're young, because you're always going to work hard. But the negative side of it is you always have that critic on your back who's telling you you're not good enough. And that's the double-edged sword with it.
let's talk about if you had one model. I know you have some great concepts. You have your awareness model. You have your feeling uncomfortable or feeling comfortable being uncomfortable. You have, when the stuff hits the fan, you got to be in control and nip it at the bud. There's so many different models and concepts that you ascribe to. What do you think is your mainstay, your main model or concept that athletes have to understand when talking about reaching their peak performance, when talking about playing to their ability in competition?
I think there's various things, Patrick, and I think some of them you were exposed to when you came, because my background in training in sport philosophy, looking at why do people play. When you know why you do something, it's easier to shovel the garbage that goes with the pursuit of excellence, because any athlete who makes a commitment to excellence, it's a love-hate relationship with what you do. You love it at times, but you also hate it at times. And that's the nature of the beast. And most people don't mention that, but I really find when you start getting into that stuff, athletes resonate with it because it's real. It's not easy to go out and, as the Greeks would say, stand naked before the gods, fully exposed, and lay it on the line. That takes a lot of courage. And for the parents listening to this, if your children are out there performing, whether it's in sport, dance, music, whatever, hey, they're a performer. A lot of young people today never take those risks. So knowing why you do something, Patrick, is key. And you remember those days we talked about that. I've been addressing that my whole career.
So what's the garbage that athletes have to shovel that makes it have that hate relationship?
Getting out of bed at 5:30 in the morning to go work out. I don't think most athletes smile when they jump out of bed to do that. I think when you play hard, do everything right, and you don't get your results, that's not easy to take. I think when you're working hard, doing all the things, and you're not getting the playing time, you want to make the big shot at the end of the game, but you miss it. That hurts. That's painful. I work with professional baseball players. You play that many games over the duration of a season. Believe me, there's times you come to the ballpark where you don't even want to play that day, but you got to get yourself ready. That's what a professional does. So there's all of that stuff that has to be dealt with. And when you know why you're doing something, it's easier to do that. The other thing, Packy, that's really impacted me is my original research, which grew out of Maslow, was when athletes are performing at their greatest, what are they doing? And when I did that research in 1973, I was the first one really looking at it in sport. So what was nice was there wasn't a lot of literature to review, but it was fascinating what the athletes came up with, because that has driven my work, because athletes talk about, today we call it the zone. And I think we went through a period in sports psych of probably 20 years where everyone was trying to get everyone in the zone. And the zone being, where you're present, where you're totally absorbed, where your thinking's crystal clear, where you have confidence, where you feel in control, where it's that relaxed effort. All of those wonderful, warm, fuzzy things. But the problem is you're only there a small percentage of time. And even if you call it flow, I still think you're only in flow states a small percentage of time. And I differ from some of the people in the field on this, but since I did the original research, it's interesting I've come to this perspective, because coaches kept telling me, Ken, we're not in the zone. We're not at that point. We're not there. And you keep talking about all this stuff, where really what we need to do is dig, claw, grind, battle, compensate, adjust. I mean, it isn't effortless. It isn't relaxed. It's a battle. And that's really important, and that's sort of where I'm at now with my work, Packy. I talk about the zone a little bit, but then it's, hey man, what are you going to do if you're in the zone, let's say 15% of the time? What are you going to do the 85% of the time you're not there? How are you going to deal with that and not just be frustrated that you're not in the zone, but how do you compensate and adjust? How do you actually get methods to take one thing at a time? How do you develop methods to calm yourself down? How do you have methods that help you with your clarity of thought as you're going through it? How do you learn to battle with the toughness of using 100% of the 60 that you got and not dwelling on the 40% that isn't there? This is where a lot of my work is at today, is giving them the tools and resources to develop that mental toughness. And this really came to me from the work with the coaches and athletes. I've been really taking this approach about the last 10 years or so. Now, I know the term resiliency is a big buzzword today from the sports world. It took me about 15 years to come to terms with it, but the last 10 or so, been really working at it from this direction, and it's been exciting because I think it's a more realistic view of what goes on for the athlete.
Well, let's talk about, I want to get into some of those specifics, but I want to talk about, you said that athletes have to know why they're doing what they're doing, basically. There has to be, I guess, an underlying motivation there or a desire.
Commitment and passion for what they do.
How do you get them to tap into that? Is that something you have or you don't? Or can you help them tap into that? Because, we know performing for a parent, probably that's not going to last. That's not going to work. And
right.
When you're trying to satisfy others around you and you're not doing
it And I think as children, there's a lot of that. And for a lot of kids in this day and age, it's get the college scholarship. And, man, when you get the college scholarship, you've arrived. And I've been at the colleges where you see the number of athletes that, they did it all this time. They did travel ball, and it's not only the athlete, it's the whole family that does the travel ball scene. Right. Everyone's, involved in staying at the Motel 6s and traveling around. I mean, I did part of it. I did it for a year with one of my daughters. And it's not easy for the family unit, But as they go through, the kid starts feeling pressure, that, hey, I got to do this, got to do it. And if you get to the higher levels, then all of a sudden the other competitors balance out, and it really gets tough because just the level of competition is so much higher.
Can you teach this commitment and this passion and knowing why you're doing it? Is that something you can teach? Or
thanks for getting me back on track there, Packy.
Sure.
That was good. Can you teach it? I think that's what I've spent my lifetime doing, going back to as a professor in physical education, then kinesiology. Why do you play? Why do you do this thing? I think asking that question. Sometimes when athletes come in, one of the first things I ask them is, and I learned this with college students way back when. Students would come in my office and say, Ken, I want to drop out of school. I would talk with them. I would listen to them. And I think you were part of some of those discussions I had in my office with students, Packy.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd talk with them, and then they'd come back, and you'd talk more, and then they'd drop out. I wasn't good at talking students into staying in school. I'm not good at talking athletes into staying with their sport. So what I did, I remember a friend telling me, well, the next time they come in, tell them to drop out. And it was interesting because the next time one came in, I said, hey, look, it's not time for you to be in school. Why don't you drop out? And the student would sort of look perplexed, and then they would eventually stand up, go to the door, and I would say, but remember when you leave campus, remember these 4 words because it's going to help you out. And the 4 words were, do you want fries? Because that's where you're going to be working. And then after you do that work for a while, then you may want to go back to school. And now they're in school because they want to be there. And so one of the ways to foster it is, hey, stop complaining and quit. And then what athletes find real quick is they don't want to quit. Okay, well, you want to be here? All right, well then, yeah. So what do you love about it? And then generally what I do, Packy, is get out a piece of paper and just start writing down all the reasons why they love participating. You know, they like their friends. They like competing. They like the uniforms. They like this. They like the smell of the ballpark. Whatever the thing may be, get it down. Think about it. With young athletes, what I do is I have them make collages make a collage of your passion for sport, and look at it once in a while and remember why you do this thing. So, yeah, I think I've definitely spent a lifetime getting people looking at their passion, and sometimes, Patrick, also finding out that I don't have the passion anymore, and it's time for me to move on, because that happens too. That's the side of it, you know?
Certainly.
And plus, as an elite level athlete, we all have to move on at some point. Mm-hmm. You know, except for the golfers. I mean, they can play a lifetime, but playing in a recreational league is a little different than playing in a highly competitive conference.
Just on the side, when you were talking, I was remembering one of the activities that you had the gymnasts do at Cal State, and you're always pretty creative with, the exercises and drawing these things out of the kids. But I think this particular exercise, you were asking the gymnasts to draw their how they see themselves in gymnastics, draw their fears or whatever comes to them. And I remember a kid that was drew the high bars, and he had sharks going all around. You remember that? He had sharks all around the high bars.
Yeah. And that's what he was perceiving, and to just get it out and talk about it a little bit and acknowledge it, and then we can deal with it, because and this leads right into the next thing that's important and it's responsibility and accountability. I mean, basic philosophical terms, being responsible and being accountable. That goes with performance, whether it's athletics, music, whatever. If the person is not going to be accountable and take responsibility, there's not much anyone can do for them.
What are they taking responsibility for? You mean going to practice or being focused in practice? What are the things that they need to be accountable for and take responsibility for?
I think it's a matter of being in control of yourself before you try controlling your performance. Mm-hmm. I think it's a matter of controlling the controllables is the term that I use. You don't have control of officials. You don't have control of playing time, but you got control of yourself and the way you go about your work and what you're doing. You have to take control to be engaged at practice and training. No question. You have to be in control of yourself. You have to have a clear plan, and you got to be taking responsibility to trust what you got each day. The final thing with responsibility for me is you got to take responsibility to get better each and every day. What did you learn? The biggest question that I ask athletes is, what did you learn today to get better? Because if you didn't learn something, then what are you doing here? Now, I'm talking about a serious athlete, okay? I'm not talking about your recreational athlete. I'm talking about someone that's really on the pursuit of excellence. And there may be days what I focused on was having a good time and having some fun, and that's okay too. But that can't be every day. You got to be focusing on some of the technical things, some of the strategic things, some of the team things. What did I learn about teammates? What did I learn about myself as a competitor? And this is throughout life if we want to be great at anything. What did we learn? I know every time to this day when I work with a team, there's a certain point where either on an airplane coming home or sitting at home when I get there, I'm going to write down, hey, I took a weekend out of my life to be with this group, what did I learn to be a better consultant, to be better at what I do? Because if I'm not doing it, how can I expect other people to do it?
Do you think in today's world of coaching, I mean, you've been around gymnasts a lot, you've been around skaters a lot, don't you think there's this over-control that really takes that responsibility away, where they're constantly told, constantly coached through it? So it's a situation where it's hard for them to take responsibility. A college football player where everything is scheduled and they're told what to do when.
Right.
Do you think there's
I think responsibility is very hard in this day and age. I mean, I have a class at Cal State Fullerton, 140 students, 137 of them live at home. And they could be aged, 21 to 25. They're not on their own. That's due to socioeconomic and just where we're at as a society today.
Right.
So taking responsibility, there's something about being on your own that goes with it, but at least sport gives them an opportunity to explore that in one domain. And hopefully we're going to get to a point where young people are taking more responsibility and being more accountable, and instead of the adult organized everything where parents at times are overly protective. I remember in my talks I used to say to parent groups, the car ride home after a game, is very difficult for the athlete. Well, today the car ride home after the game, sometimes the parents are there talking to the athlete about, geez, that coach isn't right, we got to go to another program. I mean, I've talked with high school athletes who've played at 4 different high schools. It's like, hey, realize right now you're a bench player and they're in a starting position. There isn't always a brighter side down the road. And once again, as parents, we try to do what's best, and sometimes it's very difficult decisions we have to make.
So you think today what you're teaching, it's not about the zone and getting in the zone, and that I know we've talked about how the zone is overrated in the past. You think today is teaching athletes how to adjust when things aren't going well, how to cope with mistakes, how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. You think that's the mainstay in where your main work is done?
Yeah, with the thing of moving them in the direction of trying to get back to the zone, but don't get overly obsessed with it. And I was guilty of that with athletes, trying to get them, where they would be right there. No, if they can learn tools and techniques to get more consistent, the big book is from good to great. And one thing I'm into is right now I'm into, hey, don't have a great performance, just have a good performance. Mm-hmm. Just have a good performance. Stop worrying about being great all the time. Just be good. I know the heart surgeons talk about, they have a phrase, the perfect stitch kills. In baseball, we know the perfect pitch doesn't work. Just make a good pitch, because great's going to come out of good. Now, that's a concept that's a little different, because all we hear is never be satisfied, work. But a lot of the people I'm working with are so driven, it's back to that perfectionistic thing you were talking about, Patrick.
Why do athletes have to feel like the need, like they have to be so great all the time? Is it, you think it's from that perfectionist belief, or what?
I think it's the perfectionist belief. I think it's competition. I think it's, it's going to lead to over trying and tightening up. Because when you're a kid and you're playing, and see, that's another thing that's very different is young kids, probably the place they play is when they play their video games. I mean, that's where they really play with spontaneity, and they're totally engaged in it, and they're doing it with their buddies. In our day, Packy, it would have been playing wiffle ball or playing
dodgeball,
sandlot basketball, whatever, where you played. And you weren't worried about how you felt and how your mechanics were and my focus. You just played. You competed.
Well, I think people want to be great for different reasons. I can think of a volleyball player I worked with, Ken, that she wanted to be the star. She wanted other parents to see her as the star.
Right.
You know, and so that's a different type of wanting to be great, so to speak. I think that the greatness that you're talking about is athletes that go out there and they expect to perform at their peak each and every moment of the game. I think, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, they're not going to be able to do, you're not going to be able to do that. You know, you want to do the best you can with it and engage yourself in it, and it's like, when we talk about confidence, one thing that I know about confidence, Packy, is confidence is fragile. It isn't always strong, and I know for some people you see young athletes, they're confident all the time, but as they move up, they're going to reach a point where the confidence comes and goes a little bit, and then there's the point where confidence to me is just being prepared to win the next play, the next pitch, the next possession, and do what you can to take care of that, and after that, take care of the next thing. I've had, in the last 5 years, Patrick, we've had, at Cal State Fullerton, I've had guys that graduated from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, and they served in Iraq, and then they come and they do a 2-year master's with me at Cal State Fullerton. Then they go back to West Point, where they spend 3 years running the Performance Enhancement Center at West Point, because at West Point, they have a center where they work on the skills we're talking about as they relate to sport, as they relate to academics, and as they relate to combat. And I've learned so much from these guys about things like you're not going to be comfortable all the time, that you have to maintain toughness, and you have to learn to manage the moments, and you have to learn to compensate and adjust, and you have to learn to be in enough control of yourself to keep things simple and communicate instructions, as well as keep them simple and keep your mind clear so that you can be creative and spontaneous to deal with what you have to deal with. And I think I've learned more from Travis Tillman and Doug Chadwick, the two gentlemen I'm talking about, than they probably learned from me. And they were the ones that really got me to the point with this comfortable being uncomfortable, and this idea when you go into combat, no one's totally calm, totally focused, totally centered. You have angst, you have anxiety, but you use that anxiety to sharpen your sword. And you're going to use it as an edge that's going to help you. And this was something I saw in my years of doing the work was, you know, just because an athlete's a little anxious before performance, and I would get into, hey, you got to be relaxed, you got to mellow out. That wasn't the case, you know. Mm-hmm. They needed to do what they needed to do to prepare themselves to be ready to perform, and perform being defined as to use what they got and get it done, because you're not going to feel great all the time. So it's been very exciting working with these in this domain, because I've learned so much about managing the moment.
I want to get back to that concept, and we'll probably finish on this, Ken, related to the fragile confidence, because I think that's so important. Are you saying that you tell athletes it's okay to have fragile confidence, or are you doing anything to shore the fragile confidence up to be more resilient confidence, or more stable confidence, as I call it? Is there something that you can do to help them to have more stable confidence? Because
I think we have some people are more confident than others, just generally speaking. There's no question of that. But the people that aren't, they feel so insecure with it and stuff. But if we can give them the skills, like just the understanding, don't worry about the whole season. Just take care of the next thing you're doing. You know? Mm-hmm. Just get engaged in that and break this thing down. And giving the people some resources, having something to go to when the garbage hits the fan, because the garbage will hit the fan. I mean, it's going to happen. And don't be surprised by it. I know in the Beijing Olympics, I worked with the men's volleyball team, and we prepared them for adversity and getting ready to and do the compensate and adjust. But man, what we had to deal with there, I never would have anticipated. Hugh McCutcheon's wife's parents, the father was murdered in the square 2 days before the Olympics.
Man.
And the team was in disarray. Hugh immediately left the team and went with his wife and her family, because that's where he needed to be, and the team had to perform on their own. And I still remember Coach McCutcheon, when he came back, telling me, he said, "You know, Ken, I sat in those meetings we had, because I worked with the team for 2 years going into the Olympics." He said, "I sat in all those meetings we had, and I thought, wow, this is going to be good for the team. This is going to be good for the guys." And he said, "I used all those things we talked about on myself to coach the team when I came back to it the final week of the Olympics." I mean, there's no way I was feeling. I mean, you knew how I was feeling. And it's interesting, because the beautiful thing in this work, Patrick, and you know it, and I think the parents out there know it, is we're not just talking about sport. We're talking about life. This stuff's life skills. If we're just sitting there talking about helping an athlete shoot a higher percentage of foul shots, I personally think that's rather shallow myself. But if they can learn the skills that are going to help them in life, make a difference, make our society a better place, hey, that's what it's about. And as you know, I got enough gray hair now and balding where I've had so many athletes come back and tell me, "Hey, Ken, I'm using this stuff now more in my life than I ever did as an athlete." I get a big smile when they tell me that, Packy. That's just huge.
But it seems like in today's society, Ken, that parents are going to contact me. They want to improve the performance of their kids, and that part of the life skills becomes really secondary for them. They're really looking, as you say, for that quick fix.
Right.
How can I get my athlete out of that slump and perform better?
Yeah, and that's part of our job, is to let the parents see that what the child is already doing is pretty courageous, that they're out there competing, because if it becomes so difficult for the child, for the young athlete, that it's a struggle, and they're not sure they want to do it, and they're going to burn out pretty quick on this thing. And that's why, you know, if we can keep the passion going, and the parents are a support person that can validate the child in terms of how they're progressing, how they're working at it. Because some kids are, I mean, it's straight genetics. Some kids are late maturers body-wise, just physically.
Right.
And they can come on in the high school years when they get their growth spurts, and all of a sudden, man, they're a factor, you know? And I'm not saying that's with every kid, but in some cases. So as parents, if we can just validate them for, hey, are they controlling the things they're controlling, you know? And hold them accountable for if they're just goofing off, then maybe what we need to do is we don't need to travel every weekend to a travel ball tournament. We can just play in a Saturday local recreation league. I mean, the young kids can make some of those decisions.
Let's wrap it up with your one secret, Ken. Your one secret to, it could be to happiness as an athlete, it could be to peak performance.
I think the one secret I have, Packy, is there are no secrets. It's very basic. It's very, I just don't see secrets. I think it's basic stuff. It's, I know in my work, I mean, the importance of the breath is so powerful, but that's right there, you know? I mean, it's rather obvious. But the difficult thing, maybe you could call it a secret, is it's hard to do when the garbage is hitting the fan. And I think you've got to keep this stuff basic so it works for the person when the pressure's on. So I guess that is a secret, Packy, but I think it's the awareness of the person having something to go to when adversity hits, because adversity will be hitting at some point.
Great. We'll end there, Ken. It's been a pleasure to talk with you again.
Good. Keep up the good work. Patrick, I think this is great, getting this information out to people, and at least getting people talking about it and discussing it is wonderful.
Well, you're the master at it.
Well, whatever. I learned a lot from the coaches and athletes I've worked with all these years, man. They're the ones who've been my teachers.
Well, keep doing great work, Ken.
Okay, Pat.